Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Let's Talk Rio. I'm your host, Ismaini. Here with me is Kelly. Hi, Kelly.
Hi.
So today we have an interesting topic, and we want to branch out to you guys so you really understand the biggest difference between buying a home and renting a home, but from different perspectives, right? Because everybody's lives and situations are different. And these pros and cons are going to help you understand where you are, and then if it's better to be, considering buying a home sometime soon, or if it's better to just continue to rent for the time being. So we're going to go over that. Our last episode, it was a highlight of a local business. We actually interviewed Miss Catherine Valeska, the owner of the Valeska Jewelry. And Kelly, you know more. This is close to your heart. I know you know the business. So you want to just give us a little summary and a little bit about your relationship with Catherine too.
So she has had that business forever, and I love jewelry. I met her through networking things, and her history with making jewelry and just that like the jewelry she's made and the costs and everything that goes into her business is super amazing. She can take jewelry and get cash for gold. If you look up cash for gold in Lancaster, she pops up. That's how I first went there. And then that's how I first met her. And then after that, of course, I went back, but she also was part of a couple networking coffee connection workshops that she got interviewed with how she started in the business, and she showed some pieces that she had recently made, and it's a really, really unique thing for her, and with making the jewelry and just the jewelry business itself was really fun to listen to a couple of times because I love jewelry.
And so a lot of other women too. So that's why I wanted to highlight that one. And I feel like it was so special too because she does so much for the community. She's very engaged with events and some volunteering. So I feel like that was very a good business to highlight for our first one, especially during the Women's Month.
Correct. And we met her one worker that has the Lancaster, is it Lancaster Advantage? I forget the name of it, where they have women who have suffered with homelessness or some heartache when it comes to businesses, and they come together and they make their own jewelry and they sell the jewelry. So I'm very much considering trying to be part of that, but I have to figure out how I would fit it into my schedule now.
That's always the tough part, right?
So,
but it's definitely an amazing association that they do. It's great to help support women alike that are trying to do something business entrepreneurship.
I agree.
That was a very special episode. I was very happy. Thanks for introducing me to her, because I wouldn't know otherwise, because it's a little bit out of my area, but it was a great interview. Great person to meet for sure, both of them.
Yep, I agree.
Yes. So if you haven't watched our last episode was the highlight of Miss Catherine Valeska's business, so watch it if you have some time. All right, so going into today's myth of the day. So related to our topic, of course, and a lot of people say that, this one's missing the rent, but it's supposed to say rent is less expensive than buying. Oh, actually,
He's
right.
He's right.
It's less expensive to rent than to buy. I wrote it right. I was thinking something else in my mind. But yeah, so this is like right or wrong, and we want to expand on that, right, Kelly? Because this statement could be right in certain situations for a certain amount of time. And do you want to expand it first, and then I'll kind of chime in?
Yep. And honestly, it all depends on everybody's situation.
Yeah.
So yes, in some cases it is less expensive to rent than it is to buy, but not always, and we will go over the pros and cons of each, but everybody's situation is different. Everybody. So and that's what makes our business so interesting, because everybody has a different story. And Is it less expensive to rent? Maybe for a short period of time, but
I
again,
think it's less expensive to rent up front, right?
upfront,
You may not have
upfront,
the cost of buying a home, the closing cost, the down payment. That's what people are thinking about. So they think, oh, it's much cheaper to rent. But if you actually think about it, who are you paying the money to? You
right,
paying that money to the landlord. And the
right,
landlord is paying their mortgage and building equity and building their net worth. What is the tenant doing? Paying
correct.
for space to live in and not building anything to themselves.
Hmm.
And there are many situations where someone could buy a home with very little money out of pocket, very little expense up front, depending on the circumstances, of course.
Hmm.
Again, depends on the person, but there are options that can favor the buyer to purchase for very little. And then now they're paying a mortgage that will build equity, that will build a net worth for their future. And then they can actually, sell that home or keep their home as a rental, buy another home and start building, passive income or using the equity that was built in that property. Or even if they buy one home and stay with that home forever, at the end of their retirement, they can do a reverse mortgage and actually receive money monthly. So there's so much you can do with real estate. And that's why I say, yes, it depends. I think this is still somewhat of a myth because no, overall, it's not less expensive to rent than it is to buy because buying, you may have an upfront cost, but you're paying yourself for it basically. While you're renting, you don't have an upfront cost, but you also not building anything to yourself. Um,
Right.
so, um,
And usually with renting, the upfront cost is like 1 or 2 months rent.
yeah,
And when you leave, you tend to get the majority of that back.
yeah,
It's kind of like a security deposit that sits in escrow
yeah,
for,
escrow.
for as long as you live there. And in most cases, unless you absolutely destroy the property, you're going to get that back.
Correct. Yeah, yeah. And sometimes like you mentioned it, the rent is less expensive per month because you only need 1 or 2 months deposit. But
Correct.
sometimes that 1 or 2 months deposit could be what you need to buy, depending on the
Yeah.
situation. We mentioned here in a few episodes that are first-time home buyer grants. There is the PHFA, which we will be talking a specific episode about it for you guys to understand better. But you could get up to 5% of the purchase price as closed cost assistance, and the minimum out of pocket is $1,000. That's less than a deposit. And I've had people buy a home with $1,000 out of pocket before. Not the
Yes.
most common, but it can happen.
Mhm.
So this might not be accurate at all, not even upfront. So every person's situation is different, and we're going to break it down now. We're going to get into the topic of the day and really explain the pros and pros of each of these, and then you see like where you are in your situation and see if it applies to you and what you should be doing next, basically. All right, so we'll start with the pros of buying a home. Let's talk about the good things about buying a home. Do you want to get started with a
Sure.
few points?
So, one of the big things is building equity in a home. So,
Yes.
when you buy a home, obviously, regardless of how much money you put down, homes are always going to increase in value.
Yes.
There's going
Appreciate.
to be, yep, they're always going to appreciate. There's going to be periods where it may appreciate a lot at a certain period of time, but
Yeah.
there may be periods where it only appreciates a little bit. So, it is a cycle,
Yeah.
depending on where the market is. But in almost 99% of the time, that home is going to increase in value. And
Yeah.
regardless, that aside, you're paying on your mortgage monthly. So so if you buy a house for 250,000, you're obligated to pay principal and interest on that. And as you pay on it, you're paying down the loan, and that's also building equity as well because you're paying
Yeah.
it down. So your loan to value will consistently
Decrease.
increase. It will go down, but your
Yeah.
value increases, if that makes
Yes.
sense. So
Exactly.
you're building equity in your home, and when you make changes to your home for the better, that builds equity. And
Yes.
so that just brings me into the stability of living in a home.
Mhm.
it's your home. So you can make whatever changes you want to that home.
Yes, that's a big difference between the renting portion because you're
Right.
very restricted, right, on that situation. So that stability, the things you can personalize, you can make it your own more than
Right.
you could otherwise.
Which you can when you rent, but you can't make,
Additions.
unless it's in certain situations that the
Yeah.
landlord allows you to do that. You can make it your own, but you can't make changes. You can't make structural changes
Yes. Yeah.
to a house when you're renting. And but again, with owning, you have the stability
Oh,
of.
before we move on to the next one, I wanted to chime in also on the equity building and just
Oh,
kind of
oh, okay.
a little bit more on the pros of that too, because a lot of people, oh, I buy a home, I own a home, great, but they don't realize the potential of the things that they can do with that home, right? Especially if you're like younger and trying to get out there and build something for yourself. You buy a home in the early stages or even later on, but like let's say let's focus on a younger person. You buy a home today, it's a starter home, right? Then now 2 years later, which usually 2 year requirement to be in a home so you don't have to pay capital gains. That's important to know. They're pretty aggressive. But let's say you buy a home, leave it in for 2 years. Now you want to buy a better home. You can actually sell your home and use the equity that you built into that home for the 2 years to pay for your closing costs for the next home, right? After you sell that. So now you can be a bigger home, no down payments, maybe even no down payment, no closing costs because you're covered. Maybe an even bigger down payment so your monthly payments stay lower. But now you have a better home. And you can be doing that every 2 years. And by the time you're like 10 years from now, you're going to be in a mansion. if you and not have to be paying a mansion's monthly payment. So that's one way of approaching it. Another way of approaching it is if you are planning on building passive income, you can be doing the same thing. Buy a house, 2 years, live in, move on, buy a second home. You can borrow against the first, do a cash out refinance,
Mhm.
take that money to use it to buy a second one, keep the first as a rental. Now you have passive income coming in and you have a second home. You can be doing that too. Like if that would be the easiest way of building what we call it a portfolio and creating passive income. If you're a person that's your goal, 10 years you could have five, properties and not have to work almost, like having that rental income coming in. So that's a one thing that you can do. I mentioned this on our myth portion, but let's say you just buy one home and you're making your payments and that's all you do. When you get later in life, do a reverse mortgage. You have additional income coming back to you until pass away from this life. But now you have something to leave for your family. You made
Mhm.
money from your own property. They might still have some equity left that the family can sell and still give some money to your kids. So there's so much that can come from real estate. And I really like to point it out the pros of building equity because people don't underestimate that word equity. They just don't understand what can be done with real estate. And it is really the best investment anyone can make, no matter what market you're in. Like, even if you are thinking that nowadays you're overpaying on real estate, you're not. You're still building equity for the future, no matter what you do, because there's inflation. Trust me, we're
Yep.
never going to lose money by investing in real estate. And if the market forever crashes for some reason, like it happened before, we're not in a crash market, don't get me wrong, but let's say if that ever happens, hold on to your real estate, just don't sell it, right? And if you have it as a renter, you're still making money because people still need a home to live, they're still renting, they're still buying. So it's, again, huge pro of building the equity. Equity is really a big point on owning a home. Now
Yes.
you can go to the next one, sorry.
Sure. And last but not least, and this is kind of a smaller benefit, but it's the tax benefit. So,
Yeah, that's a good one too.
yep, the tax deductions on your mortgage that you make, the interest that you gain that you pay on your mortgage, you can use that as a tax deduction at the end of the year, as one of your deductibles. So that is definitely a bonus, and that's with a home if you have a home equity or just your regular mortgage.
Correct.
Any interest that you pay, that is all tax deductible. So,
Yeah.
with that being said, those are the pros. Now, next I'm going to go into the cons of buying a home. So one of the biggest things is your upfront costs. Upfront costs with buying a home, they in most cases require a down payment. We do have a ton of products that don't, but you also have your closing costs. And depending on the price of the home, the closing costs are going to be several $1,000s, most likely in lieu of about 7 to 10,000, give or take. However, we do have products where, like you had mentioned in one of our episodes, you had somebody, they bought a house with just $1,000.
Yep.
That is a thing. However, it all depends on it's not the norm. It all depends on your situation, but we do have grant programs, all kinds of different things that we offer that help with upfront costs. But upfront cost is one of the biggest cons of purchasing a home. And not only do you have your down payment, your closing costs, but there could also be, this would be in certain situations where you agree with the seller to maybe make some repairs on the property. But again, that's something that is negotiated with the seller, and it all depends on the situation, the house, if you really want the house, some buyers will negotiate that and pay that up front. So the next thing would be a con is the maintenance and repairs on a home.
So now you own it, you gotta be responsible for it.
now it's your home, so anything that goes wrong, it's on you. Now you do have insurance. Homeowner insurance is definitely a requirement. And you have to watch our episode with Bill. He gives a good overview of all the different types of homeowners insurance and what it entails. There are certain things that you can put a claim into your insurance, and then your insurance will pay for it.
Yes.
But there are other things that are outside of your insurance that
unfortunately are not going to be covered.
That aren't going to be covered. So certain things like a hot water heater or your heating and air conditioning, those are things, or like a dishwasher that leaks or whatever, that's a warranty or something that you would have to get in contact with them on it, not your homeowners.
One thing that is good to point it out too on this particular topic about the maintenance and repairs and things that are not covered by the homeowners insurance. One way to maybe counter this con in particular would be to obtain a home warranty. When you buy a home, you can get a home warranty at settlement. I personally usually give my buyers a home warranty when they purchase as a gift, because it really covers them for that first year to have a peace of mind if something breaks, and you will cover those things that are usually not commonly covered on a homeowner's insurance. So your dishwasher, your stove, a roof repair that because maybe started leaking, needs a roof repair. So little things, not everything is covered because it's not miracle worker, but you can get that peace of mind of majority of the major items that are going to be taken care of. And that is something you as the buyer and homeowner now can continue to renew and get it every year. It's not necessarily an expensive thing. You can actually buy a home warranty every year. Usually they run about $500. If you add additional things to it, it can be a little more. But it's one time for the year. And for some people, that's actually pretty valuable, especially if you have a home that is dated, and you're coming to its end of life, right? The design life. So it might be a recommendation to get it. So this would be a good way to counter this con that we have. But again, overall, you're responsible for it.
Yes, you are responsible for buying but unless Nini is your realtor and she covers your first one, it's struggling.
Exactly.
But yeah, that's a very good point. Home warranties are a very good thing to have.
Yeah.
So, and last but not least, you have limited flexibility with just deciding to move out of your home, because you can't, it's your home, you own it, unless you're looking to purchase another home, you have the limited flexibility with moving, renting, depending on your rent, you can sometimes move a little bit easier with renting versus owning a home.
Yeah.
Um,
I think that's the one con that is very situational, right? Depending on the people's life right now. Like if
and
they are,
to rent too, because sometimes you can rent month to month,
yeah,
or for 6 months,
6 months, yeah,
maybe twice a year or yearly. Every landlord is different, but you do have
yeah,
those options with renting. So,
right,
but I think that about covers it with the major cons with purchasing a home,
correct.
which brings us into the pros of renting a home.
Yeah.
So to back on the flexibility of renting it does provide you more flexibility to move, which can be beneficial to those who may need to relocate because of work. In those situations, a lot of times you're going to most likely be in somewhere you're going to pay rent to rent. If you are somewhere and you're like contract basis and you have to move from state to state with different jobs or job opportunities, you're not necessarily going to be purchasing a home every year.
Yeah, you don't want to settle down, right? Because it's a big commitment when you purchase a home. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a bigger commitment. So renting in that case, and everybody's situation is different, it would make sense to rent. And that helps with that flexibility. Another thing is the lower upfront costs with renting. In most cases, you probably have to put down a security deposit, which ends up being 1 or 2 months rent, give or take, depending on who you're renting with. And when you leave, you most likely get that back, unless you totally damage the property and,
Yeah, unless there's a circumstance otherwise, but it's very, very limited on the cost up front in comparison to majority of times that you're buying a home, right? Because we mentioned some specific situations that could be other way around. But the norm is that, yes, you're going to have an upfront cost to purchase a home in comparison to renting, much less expensive. So it's definitely a plus on renting, especially if you're renting right now, you don't have the funds to buy, or you're not in the place that you want to be yet, right? Location wise, or maybe you don't know whether you want to be in this location. I know a lot of buyers sometimes will rent, particularly in a city, because they want to test it out, and then they end up buying a year later. So that could be something big that is a pro for renting, is this flexibility of being able to go there with very minimal amount of money up front, and then test it out an area to find out whether you like it or not. So maybe that's another pro, disponibility of you be able to test it out on an area before you buy.
Yep. And last but not least is the maintenance and repairs.
Yeah.
So the fact that this is a pro, you as the person renting don't have to pay for that. You shouldn't have to pay for it.
That's something. Yeah, depending on your contract. So what's your contract?
The property manager, when anything goes wrong, I know in all the places that I rented, they took care of everything. You have very minimal things that you have to pay for.
A rental. Yeah.
With a rental. And I know one time we had these bugs that got in our apartment, and I'll never forget my husband telling me he was very glad that I didn't see how many there were, because he vacuumed them all up and got rid of them. But we called the property manager, and they had an exterminator come out immediately to get rid of it.
Yeah.
So
that's a huge plus, not having to worry about those things.
Yeah, not because if you own your home, that's on you.
Yeah, you have to have the little, what do you call it? The emergency fund, right? Ready to go, just in case something comes up in your property. Because there are things that are going to come up every time. Like it's just what it is. And I think another one that we can mention too as a pro in a way of renting is that some rentals include some of the utilities as well.
That is correct.
There's less cost monthly because they might include water and trash. I don't usually see electric being included, but who knows, some of them might.
No, not usually. Trash was a big one.
Trash is a big one. Water sometimes.
Yeah.
So that could be a pro.
Very few utility things. Like your cable you pay for. But but you're paying for your cable because you want to watch TV.
Exactly.
You know what
That's
I
a
mean?
personal thing. Yeah.
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 So yes, you have very, very limited utilities that you have to pay for. So less cost to you.
Overall.
When
Time, more money for you to save to buy a home.
correct.
When the time is right.
So that brings us into the cons of renting.
Yeah.
The biggest thing is no equity building.
Yeah.
So you can, in some cases, possibly save a little bit with not buying because you don't have all the expenses when it comes to owning a home. However, you're not building any equity anywhere. You're paying rent. You can't sell your rental because you don't own it.
Yes. And a lot of people come to me and say maybe they are actually ideal buyers. It's the right time to buy. They know the area they want to buy, but they say, I don't want to buy now because the interest rates are high. And I look at them and I'm like, you're currently renting, right? And you're like, yes. So you're currently paying 100% interest. Do you realize that? And even if I feel like sometimes people have to stop thinking about the interest rate because interest rate can be refinanced and you can get a low interest rate later on. But as soon as you can qualify based on today's interest rates for the budget that you think it's right and necessary to buy the house you want, that's all you need to worry about. Because the interest rates, when they go down, guess what? Your monthly payments could be going down because you can refinance your account and get a lower interest rate. So get out of renting. If that's the only reason for not buying right now, so that you're worried about the interest rates, forget about that. Try to get qualified, see if you can qualify for what you want. If you have already savings, that's great to go. Stop paying 100% interest rate on your rental. Because that's the worst part. Start paying towards yourself. That's really the biggest thing that you have to think about.
So, and that brings me into the next con is in most cases, your rent increases every year.
Yes.
Everywhere I've lived where I rented, it always went up. Sometimes it only goes up by like $10, but sometimes it can go up from quite a bit more than that. Yeah. So that is definitely something every year rent goes up until they find somebody else to rent, and then they'll start back out the smaller amount. But then as that person lives there each year, that rent goes up. And you're not building any equity when you're renting.
No, and they can change the rules on you because you're going to have a contract, right, for maybe a year or 6 months or however you started. Then the next contract, guess what? They can change all the rules on you. And that brings us to the limited control portion. Because what if they decide that you're paying $900, but now they want to charge $1,100? Guess what? They can, because your contract is done. And now they're going to charge you $1,100. And you find yourself in a situation where you have to be paying the new rate because you don't have time to find a home to buy, or maybe not be ready to buy yet, right? So now you have that out of control situation where you're really depending on that landlord. And what if that landlord decides to sell the house? How many listings I've sold that were, tenant occupied? Now that tenant has to find a home in 30, 60, 90 days, and they were not planning on buying, right? So that kind of situation can be scary for a lot of tenants. And that's, I think, one of the biggest cons on renting. Yes, the other two are not good either, but I think that not knowing what's going to happen, I think that's the biggest con, is the insecurity of, do I have a home next year, right? Can I afford this apartment that I'm renting right now next year? Is he going to start charging extra things? Is he going to throw me out and sell the house? So there's so much that can come out of it. And I think that is a huge con on renting.
Yep. Sure. That and one thing too, that you kind of have mentioned, like maybe you're renting a house and whoever you're renting it from decides they want to sell that house.
Yeah.
And you may not be in a position to buy it, but maybe you are.
Yeah, so, maybe you are. It might be your push to go.
Yeah.
But if you're not, then it's scary, right? Because now you have to find another rental. And as a lot of people know, rental market, it's tough.
It is tough. Rent has increased
location,
a lot
with a good price. It's really difficult sometimes.
So that pretty much sums it up. So in conclusion, whether it makes sense to rent or buy all depends on your situation.
Yes.
And what I would recommend is to talk to a realtor,
Mm-hmm.
see what makes sense.
Yeah.
They, depending on the realtor, they may push you to buy or not. But again, your situation is going to be different from anybody else's. And um, talking to a realtor and a lender to see, I don't have to pull credit, but I can also help you decide if it makes sense for you to
To
rent
wait
or
a little.
buy. Look at the financial side of things,
Yeah.
where are you at in your life? I can do a pre-approval, and if you are pre-approved and you can move forward to buy, then maybe it makes sense to buy. But if you're not and you're not ready for that um, commitment, because when you buy a house, it is a commitment,
Yeah.
whereas renting, there's a commitment, but only a short-term commitment.
Yeah.
um, so if you'd like to add on to that.
Yeah, and I think it brings me back to the same thing I mentioned about yes. The thing I mentioned on our this getting ready to sell episode when I said that most sellers usually reach out to me months before they're looking to sell. It's the same thing with a buyer. So if you are renting right now and you know that you don't have funds to buy,
Mm,
still you should be talking to a lender like Kelly to understand what's needed to get you there.
yep.
Because you may have an idea, but you may not even know exactly. Sometimes people come to us thinking that they can never buy, and then they can buy next month, or they think they can buy, but they might have to wait 6 months because we need to work on some things. But
Yep.
they would know otherwise if they didn't talk to us. So even if you know right now you need to save more and all this, and a lot of people want to like, I don't want to talk to anybody now because I'm not ready. Well, that's the time to talk to someone so we can help you get the best ready you can be to buy a home and have the best situation for you to buy, because we can prepare you. We can say, look, we can get you the top credit shape, like things. We can give you advices on what to do so your credit goes up, so that way you can get a better rate. We can help you find ways to save money to prepare for that. We can see which grants you can qualify for if you are a first-time home buyer or not. We can see which loan types would be the best ideal scenario for you in order to achieve what you're looking to achieve. So there's so much that goes into it, and we won't be able to help you if you don't come to us with enough time. Unfortunately, a lot of people come to us when they're like, I'm ready. But then we're like, okay, let's just deal with what we have on hands, right? But if we can prepare you ahead of time and shape you to be a better buyer, we will. And doing this ahead of time is the best thing you can do. So even if you don't know, talk to Kelly. That way she will be able to get you ready and in shape to purchase a home, maybe sooner than what you think, sooner than what you expect.
Yep. Absolutely.
Awesome. Hopefully this was insightful to you guys, to understand who are you right now. Are you a renter a tenant that needs to wait a little longer, or maybe you are just scared of buying and need to know more about yourself, to see if you can qualify. Just get in touch with us. We'll be happy to answer your questions. But hopefully this was kind of open your mind to understand the differences between renting and buying. And that's all I have.
Yep.
Awesome.
I don't have anything else to add to that. I think it was just a good one.
Awesome. Oh, well, guys, you have a great day. We'll see you in the next episode then. See ya.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.